Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host of Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Mitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We have a very exciting interview with us today. We have Pablo Gonzalez. He's the CEO of Bitso. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Trace. It's great to be here and great to be in Mexico, with all the Bitcoin crowd locally.
Yeah, and everything that's going on. So how did you get into Bitcoin?
So I got into Bitcoin through our other founder of Bitso, Ben Peters, who's our CTO. About 3-4 years ago, he told me about this thing that he read that's called Bitcoin, and he tried to explain me. So at first I didn't understand, but it was a bit of intriguing for me. So I went back home and I started Googling it, and that was it. That was when everything went to... I just got into it and got obsessed by the technology, got obsessed by the potential. So I just want to know more, and that's kind of how it evolved.
Now, what's really exciting about my BitPay, for example, their transaction volumes, they're growing everywhere. They're growing in North America, they're growing in Europe, they're growing in Asia, but far and away, Latin America is where the big growth is coming with BitPay. What do you think's driving that? Like, what's going on in Latin America in the Bitcoin community?
That's completely true. Other than Argentina, where there's a vibrant community, and there's been a vibrant community for a few years, in Latin America, the community was very small. So at the beginning, the volumes were small, the growth was low, and for the past year, Latin America has been waking up to this technology. And the thing in Latin America that's very potent is that there's so much potential. There's so many holes to fix with this technology that is driving a lot of the growth. I lived in Canada for 11 years, and that's when I first got into Bitcoin. And when I was down there, there's a lot of potential for change for Bitcoin, and I was already intrigued by it. But looking back at a place like Mexico, where you have a very low population of that's banked. So in Mexico, 7 out of 10 Mexicans do not have a bank account.
Wow, I didn't know it was that high.
It's super high, and then there's like 12% of the population has credit cards. So most of the economy, it's a cash economy. People do not trust. There's a trust issue.
Well, yeah, because they devalue every couple of years in all these different countries. Whether it's the real, the Argentine peso.
I mean, we have a pretty strong devaluation from December to March. But the Mexican peso has been very strong. So it's one of the most stable economies in Latin America. It's actually not like the only thing that happened is that the U.S. dollar got stronger against everything else. But more than the devaluation, we had a couple times that the Mexican peso in 94, for example, it went from 3 pesos per dollar to 11, right? So we had a couple times where it's been really bad. But the thing is that people do not trust these institutions to put their money in these institutions, and they feel like they're getting watched. And, there's a cultural issue, but there's also a location issue. So, Mexico is a big country, and if you look at all the municipalities in Mexico, only half of them have a financial institution in them, whether it's a bank or or even a Western Union. So even if people wanted to be banked, they have to travel to this physical location and get a bank account, and that limits their ability to trade with people. So you can only do commerce as long as your physical ability allows you.
Yeah, let alone e-commerce.
Yeah, e-commerce.
It's probably very difficult down here.
Exactly. So what excited me is that in Mexico, you have a extremely high cell phone adoption. So almost every Mexican now has a cell phone. So it's 99% of Mexicans has access to a cell phone signal. Smartphones are growing, I mean, even faster than the US, right? So, and it's a pretty young population. So Mexicans are like a 26-year-old median, 26 and a half. So it's one of those places that is perfect. It's just primed for these type of innovations to take over. And for me, that's the thing that was extremely exciting. And, when we were looking at Mexico and there was nothing happening, in Canada or in the US or in Europe, there was a lot of, interesting Bitcoin projects. But in Mexico, it was very slow more community. So we decided to come back and, and set shop and try to promote the benefits of, what this technology could bring. So that was, the thing that initiated this, like the community here to start growing, and then there's other companies that started popping up. So for me, the potential in, you see developed countries, and yeah, they can use Bitcoin, but already the infrastructure is pretty good. But developing countries, I think that's where it's at. Developing countries where, people don't have bank accounts, there's corruption, there's many problems, and there's so many things that you can fix. The opportunity is enormous.
And especially, Mexico, I think, is a very interesting use case because, you go back and look at the history a couple hundred years ago, the U.S., they had their own domestic law, because they fought the revolution, but Mexico was still very much under the Spanish, and the Spanish would come up with, they'd come up with these policies, but they wouldn't work on the ground. And so then it's kind of bred this culture where they've had to work around the law in order to just survive. So I think that might be one of the reasons why they don't see much of a need for intermediaries down here. Whether it's banks or financial institutions, they take care of themselves, and they take care of themselves, and why should I trust them? They're just going to try and steal my money anyways.
It is a culture where people say, I will take care of myself. The government is not going to do it for me, right? So it's been like that, as you say, for many years, and it's created that culture. And even then, it was, if you look at hundreds of years ago, it was very feudal system. So you had these, like Spanish lords that were already Mexican. Even the revolution.
The Zapatas.
Yes. So, like the independence was started by Spaniards, everything, right? So, you have these divisions in Mexico that are still present. So, yeah, people don't want to store their money with the government or some private
why trust them?
But the problem is, it ends up being quite, it's a bit of a cancer, right? Because there's a lot of people that cannot progress if they don't have financial tools that everybody else has. So, for me, that's, there's that divide, and people take care of themselves, but at the same time, they're already on a disadvantage from the start.
Well, Bitcoin is great for that in the sense that it helps with trust minimization. They can trust the protocol instead of trusting an intermediary or third party. And then you can begin to build the tools on top of that that'll solve a lot of the other problems that people have. So, what are you doing at Bitso to solve some of these solutions then?
Well,
to provide the solutions,
yes, exactly.
Solve some of these problems.
One of the things that you mentioned, that they can trust the protocol. The problem with people trusting the protocol is that they need to know about the protocol, they need to understand the protocol, and most people won't take any time to do that. If you're hitting at that our audience, that's the 7 out of 10 Mexicans that do not have a bank account.
Well, yeah, but they can have like a bread wallet or a copay wallet, and then they're trusting the protocol in the sense that they've got their own private keys, and it's a free open source wallet that they're using. They're not having to trust the bank or a third party institution with the keys to their money.
Yeah, no, exactly. But for those things to work, they need to be able to understand kind of how it works
and have some trust in it.
And some trust in it, and some people do, but that's a slower change. That's going to take more time. So what we do is we have people trusting, like we're trying to make Bitcoin easier for people to use. So we're trying to set up these infrastructures that it connects to systems that are already in place, and we just make them more efficient.
So what would be an example of that?
One of the examples is the remittance use cases, right? So
yeah, because it's the largest corridor in the world. United States to Mexico.
United States to Mexico is the largest corridor in the world. We're doing use cases where we offer these solutions to remittance companies, so they integrate to Bitso, and they're able to move funds easier, and they're able to automate more things, so that the end product, it's maybe an app where they receive their remittances, and it's super easy for the customer, and they can go and pick up their money on an ATM, and you're kind of removing a bit of the Bitcoin from Bitcoin, but the end product ends up being, like people think like they're just downloading an app. So, for example, like Mexico was the first country to have more Facebook accounts than there's citizens in Mexico.
Oh, wow.
So just to give you an idea of what type of culture, like when something takes off, it really does. And, for these use cases, it's because it's practical, because it's accessible. So it's about accessibility. And there's a trust factor, but if something's very accessible, people will trust it a bit better, rather than having you go to the branch and you sit down for an hour while they interview you and try to open a bank account. Here they can just download an app, right?
Right.
Like a Copay wallet or something.
And so is it kind of like Abra then? You plug in, you use Bitcoin as the rails for these remittances?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, us as Bitso, we don't really offer the consumer solutions.
Okay.
We're more of a,
B2B?
B2B, like we're offering the infrastructure. So when we're looking at Mexico and we identified all these issues that were happening, with both financial access, remittances, international payments, things like that, we identified that none of these would work without having a liquidity pool, an easy way to change from peso to Bitcoin and vice versa, and an easy way to plug into the local payment networks, things like that.
Yeah, you have to have an exchange.
Exactly.
That's one of the reasons I funded Kraken.
Yes.
We have to have an exchange. We got to have a wallet to secure our Bitcoins. Once we have our Bitcoin secured, we got to have an exchange in order to create the liquidity. And so you're focusing on that fundamental piece of the exchange portion.
Exactly. We're focused on the exchange portion, but compared to many other exchanges, in Mexico we don't have that many speculators that come in and do, day trading, things like that. Yeah, there's some. But
you're focused more on the business to business side.
On the international payment
You're helping
side.
connect the Mexican Bitcoin economy with the businesses that interact with the retails to the larger liquidity pools like Kraken and Bitfinex and Bitstamp and everything.
Exactly. So, for example, one of the things, like BitPay, we're working with BitPay, and BitPay settles their merchant payments with us. So we have a way...
Into the Mexican pesos?
Into the Mexican pesos. And we push those payments to the merchants.
Okay, perfect.
So we're not going after the merchants, but we're offering the liquidity pool, the payment systems.
You provide this modularized piece that helps get that done.
Exactly.
And then we get some economies of scale. You're able to focus on that, and then BitPay is able to focus on merchant acquisition, and we're not duplicating a bunch of work.
So it's companies like Abra, like BitPay, Align Commerce, they're connecting to Bitso.
Okay.
And we're doing we make it really easy for these partners to connect. One of the things we have, we're connected into the banking system like a bank. So we can create bank account numbers for our customers. So when they open their accounts, they get a unique bank account number where they can push payments real time from any bank in Mexico.
Oh, interesting.
So funds get credited in -5 seconds to their Bitso accounts, or vice versa. We can push funds to any bank account, or in Mexico, or mobile numbers. So there's this thing in Mexico called lightweight banking, and that was an initiative from the government to bank more people because banks weren't getting it done.
Doing it.
No, they weren't doing it. I mean, they've been trying for 30 years, and the progress is just so slow. So they try to do something with mobile banking similar to M-Pesa,
Okay, yeah.
but it's struggled a bit. I mean, there's maybe 4 million customers using that. But what we do is that we send payments to a mobile number. They're able to get, let's say you have Bitcoin and you're gonna pay somebody in Mexico. You can pay to a mobile number. They get the pesos, and then they just go to a convenience store like Oxxo, get a card, and withdraw on an ATM. So we're making it easy with these very easy access. They're not as KYC, because the limits are pretty low. Not as KYC account, so people can trust them and access them and have some of the tools. So
and it probably makes it a lot easier for their relatives
Yes.
to remit the money back and have a lot lower fees.
So, for example, if you're a remittance company, you can connect to us really easy with our APIs. We have remittance APIs. We have things very specialized for international payments. And we can just push the funds, pesos, to bank account, mobile numbers.
Well, I interview pretty much just CEOs for the podcast. I like to hope that they listen to interviews besides just their own. If you're speaking directly to some of the CEOs of Bitcoin companies, what are the business opportunities that they could have with Bitso?
Okay.
How can they build some bridges? How can they plug in with you? How can they tap into this Mexican market without having to really incur a bunch of expenses
Exactly.
tapping into the Mexican
So
market?
we make it really easy. And that's one of the things that makes Bitso different. So for these partners wanting to come in Mexico, what we do, we're an enabler for, let's say BitPay.
BitPay is a good example.
BitPay is a really good example where they don't even need to have a Mexican entity. They were just able to come in, plug into our exchange. We set up an account with them, and they can push payments in real time. They don't need a bank account. So we enable international businesses to tap into the Mexican market with very low barrier of entry. So if you're, especially in international payments, that's where we're seeing a lot of potential. So, for example, Line Commerce is one of our partners that we're working. And Mexico is really interesting because from Latin America, Mexico is king for cross-border payments. So remittance corridor, it's a 24 billion a year market. But trade like import, export, that's 800 billion.
Yeah.
So it's 33 times larger. And a lot of it is small and medium businesses that charge a lot of money and things like that. So, when they want to move funds, it's pretty expensive for them, right?
Yeah.
So when looking at that, there's so much potential in Mexico for cross-border payments, for e-commerce. The amount of fraud in Mexico, I forgot the number, but it's incredibly high. The amount of credit card fraud, the amount of, and that's because the systems are not.
They're just not in place.
In place.
There isn't really a market here. Only 30% are banked.
Exactly.
Only 12% have a credit card. Why build all these systems? Nobody's using those tools. Yeah, it's expensive to build the systems.
I'm sure you've been to a lot of, the fintech conferences like Money 2020 and things like that. Half of the people there, they're credit card, fraud prevention, and risk management businesses. And I'm just looking around and I'm like,
why do we even need these?
All these guys are completely unnecessary with Bitcoin, right? So,
we create an intermediary, then we have to create another intermediary to solve the problem that comes from having the first intermediary.
And more of those are coming up, and they're just popping up.
And it just keeps raising the cost and raising the cost and raising the cost using those methods. Whereas, why? If you're on the ground in Mexico, you look at it and you're like, well, why should I pay all that money for that? I'll just use cash.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or bang with ease, with Bitcoin. You're removing all those layers of unnecessary fat, because that's what it is. It just started becoming more complex.
Yeah.
And there's all this risk management for payments and things, and all these compliance things. If you can automate everything in Bitcoin and you don't have the worries about fraud, you can automate your compliance. You can automate everything, right? Because you connect to the money
when it's
directly.
It's programmable money. Yeah.
So, when I look at those things. It's kind of in Mexico, I think people are going to skip the generation from having a credit card, and they're going to go directly
to Bitcoin. Yeah, kind of like
mobile,
skipping the landline and going straight to a cell phone type of thing. Yeah, you'd interacted with the central bank here in Mexico. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that experience.
So yeah, we've been very active with the regulators. So one of the big bets we've done, Bitso, is that if this is going to work, we need to push forward the compliance front, the regulation front. So we went to talk to the regulators last year, to the central bank, and they know...
Well, and this was 2014.
This is 2014.
Okay.
Well, at the beginning, what we did, it's not the central bank, but the supervising entity for financial institutions. We consulted with them before opening Bitso, and they said, it's not illegal, and it's not regulated yet, and...
Have fun.
Well, not have fun, but be responsible and, get it, go for it. So when we're talking to the central bank, they know quite a bit about Bitcoin. They know, well, as many central banks, but Mexico, it's a very progressive central bank. It's one of the few institutions that works best, the central bank. So they were able to say, look, right now it's just tiny. I have bigger things to worry. There's money laundering in these street currency exchanges. There's nothing more, right? Yeah. So
you get Wells Fargo and Wachovia laundering money for the drug cartels and HSBC. Exactly. They got bigger fish to fry, right?
So they said, well, this is just not worth our
time and attention.
We'll look for it. We'll look after it. Keep us updated. So we've done that.
Well, it's good for them to have a phone number and a friendly face that they can call when they got questions about it.
So then, that evolved a bit after BitLicense was released. So Mexico generally grabs US regulation, they do a Google Translate, change a couple things, and then that's it, right? They send it to the Senate. So when the BitLicense came out, there was some pressure for a supervising entity, the normative entity, to regulate Bitcoin. So we've been talking to them actively, and we help them understand, what the technology is, how, there's different. It's not as simple as, okay, you just grab some law, translate it, adapt it to Mexican regulation. There's nuances that need to be different, and nuances like, multi-signature. We spent 2 hours drawing charts about multi-sig because, for example, we're integrated with BitGo. So
with BitGo?
With BitGo. So for security and keep our, we want to make sure that
we're doing Mount things. Gox.
Yeah, no Mount Gox and all these things. And it's great and we love it because it's, it makes our exchange more secure. But the way that the law was written, that's what's going to go out for Bitcoin, it would make a company like BitGo be regulated in Mexico because they have one of the keys. And us, we were like, well, if there's one company in Mexico that they're working with, which is Bitso, and suddenly they need to be regulated, they're just going to say, screw it, I'm out of Mexico, it's too expensive. And then we're not going to get the cool technological innovations, we're not going to get the security, the protection. So
we're going to get blackballed by the industry
exactly
because it's too small of a market. It's a chicken and the egg type of problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we, locally, they've been very open, and we've been able to, work on this law that's getting created for regulating Bitcoin entities. So it's becoming a very friendly, it's one of the best regulations we have, and I have them on my WhatsApp, and they ask me things every now and then. So it's good, we're trying, that's what we set out to do, is to promote positive things,
interaction
for this
with them.
Technology in Mexico, and it goes from government to regulators to businesses, private banks, things like that. So you cannot just go and try to, go around these things. So.
Yeah, well, it's been just a tremendous interview. We've had with us Pablo Gonzalez. He's the CEO of Bitso. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you very much, Trace. Pleasure.
Be sure sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.